Really just want to eliminate any shame and guilt around money and spending. Going out to buy a latte is not going to bankrupt you. So I want to give everybody listening permission to not stress out about that right now. It's really about, like you said, just like thinking about how you want to live your life and how you want to enjoy your life. We all only have today. So like it's not about like extreme deprivation, like a deprivation diet. I kind of compare it to that because it's so much harder to stick to something if you keep telling yourself you can't, you have to deprive yourself of everything joyful. That doesn't sound fun. It doesn't sound expansive. And it sounds like I'm probably not going to want to do it after a week. But if you give yourself permission to both take care of yourself and then like spend on things that you love, who cares if somebody else thinks it's frivolous or whatever? If you love it and you're happy, great.
Welcome to the Limitless Podcast, the show where women entrepreneurs become radically aware of their limiting beliefs, learn to value their worth, generate wealth, and to thrive as a magnetic brand leader. I'm your host, Jamie Ratermann, a six-figure holistic business coach. I've helped over 100 rebellious entrepreneurs master marketing, embody leadership, and say fuck it to the hustle. Let's dive in. Hello, lovelies. Welcome to another episode of the Limitless Podcast. Today, we have a special guest. We have Elizabeth Michelle. She is our financial coach, and I have been looking for somebody just like this for all of you, because one of the things whenever we're talking about selling, whenever we're talking about building business, it's has a lot to do with our relationship to money. And oftentimes when somebody is leaving their corporate job, coming into new business in general, they're wanting to hit those high figure months. If we have let's just be clear, a shitty relationship with money, it makes it really hard. So whenever I met Elizabeth in a community called Ready, Set, Coach, it was one of Emily Merrill's community who we had on the podcast a little bit ago. She was telling me all about what she did. And I was like, you know what? You would be so perfect for my limitless listeners who are looking to make sure that their business is viable for them now and in the future. So, Elizabeth, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Tell us a little bit more about what you do.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Jamie. I'm Elizabeth Michelle. I'm a financial coach, and I specialize with working one-on-one with women. I think it's so important that women feel really confident in their money, whether they're an entrepreneur or they have a corporate job or anywhere in between, that they're armed with the resources and education to really build the life that they want. And some of what I do too is working with women on mindset and manifestation practices, because I think our relationship with money and the feelings we have around money are such big influences on how we manage it in our day-to-day lives and how we use it to build that dream life that we want and how we interact with it.
Totally. I feel like it's such a like it feels like when it's abundant, and when you're in debt, it feels so different. And I think there's a sense of how much, at least for me, when I'm talking to clients, is like, how can we detach our self-worth? How can we build our confidence within ourselves? But I particularly love that you talk about helping women specifically. Let's just kind of ask the direct question. Why do you think women have a different relationship to money, maybe a worse relationship to money than what men have?
Yeah, so I think it's different. I wouldn't say it's worse because I don't want to one of the things I work on with women a lot is like taking out any of like the negativity or shame around it. I think one of the biggest things is we're just raised differently traditionally to think about money. When you think about the way boys and men are introduced to money, it's a lot about like that provider mindset. So they inherently have the permission to go after money, to ask for what they deserve, to not think it's crazy to ask for more than what they deserve, to be at the conversation with money, to talk about money. But in opposition to that, you don't really see that with girls and women. It's a lot more about being like the caretaker and kind of focusing on taking care of the family and finding a husband that's good with money or a partner that's good with money. And, you're kind of raised to not bother anybody or not stir up anything or not to ask for things. So I think it's just a different relationship that we're taught. So a lot of times I find that like women are a little bit more afraid to talk about it, or they feel like they're bothering somebody if they're negotiating a salary, for example. They're not just necessarily given the same seat at the table. And so that's what one of the biggest reasons I wanted to get into this business is because I want women to feel like we also have and deserve that seat at the table. That there's women in the finance space that represent you and me and look like us and like have the same experiences that we do because money does affect us differently too. And I think it's really important for women to have that space that they feel safe and comfortable to talk about money.
And I think this is like such a big conversation to have too, though, is that we we get to reposition ourselves as providers and caretakers. And we can also ask that of men, is that they get to
Mhm.
be providers and caretakers as well. So I think there's such a big part of um there's such a big part of this that is like, why can't we just take on the new roles? And how can this be a little bit different? For me, I remember like my mom and my dad were both like just kind of talking about how we learned about money. My dad was like the finance guy. Like it is absolutely the traditional role where like he would be the one that's balancing the checkbook and to be able to go like he'd be like, hey, why do we spend this much on groceries? So there was this regular
Mhm.
talk about who was doing it back and forth. So I think this is something that is interesting because I was telling you before we pressed record is that a lot of my clients is that some of them are hyper focused on their money, and then we kind of talk about where do they learn that, and then also the other side of it where they never look at it. So whenever you're kind of thinking about these roles, like what kind of habits would you say help somebody to kind of build a better relationship with money?
Yeah, I love that question. Um, I would say having a regular date with your money is one of the best practices.
I
And I
love
think it,
money dates. I love that you call it
yes.
the exact thing that I do. Like I will make a little like even if it's like a mocktail at the end of the meeting, I'm
Hmm.
like, how's my revenue? How's my budget? It's like and I like make it into a party because I think I used to not feel that way, but I love that you called it a money date for the fact that like I think I'm like a bi-weekly money date girly, but like in general it's like how do I get excited to look at where things are? And usually after the fact, I feel like, oh, okay, it's all possible. We're good. We're okay. But tell me
Yes,
more why you love money dates.
I love that. So here's something I think that we don't talk about enough, but it's true, is I mean, money is one of the most important relationships you have in your life, and it's in your life forever. So I really think it's like you treat it like any other important relationship in your life. You date your money and you make it fun and you schedule those dates. You have regular communication about your money. You nurture your money. You celebrate milestones with your money, whether it's small or big. It's kind of the same idea as if you're like with a long-term partner, you make the effort to put the work into that relationship. So I like money dates because exactly what you're saying, it makes it fun. It's something that you can regularly have and you can create the ambiance to make it exciting and to like make it a positive relationship with your money instead of something that you dread every month. It doesn't have to be stale, like sitting at your computer pulling up a spreadsheet and just feeling like, oh, I don't want to look at this. You can do exactly what you said is like I do that too. Like have a your favorite beverage or like do it over a meal, light some candles, like make it fun so it's something that you look forward to every time you do it.
Totally, totally. I think I've talked about this in a way that's like, if you're an anxious attachment style and avoidant or you're secure in your money, like it all
Mhm.
like even though that wonderful book is talking about your romantic relationships, it
Mhm.
applies to just about everything in your life. And so just kind of talking about this, like for me, I think the basics for anyone who is an entrepreneur is to be able to figure out what are your expenses. So
Mhm.
like somebody like I'll ask the question because this is usually something that comes up like, okay, what kind of sales do we want this next launch or this next campaign to do for you? And they'll throw out a number and I'm like, okay, does that surpass your like is that double your expenses? Is that where is that at? And then the half of them go like the ones that seem to be really meticulous about their spending will be like, I don't know if I can get that. I don't know if I can get there. So they almost feel like they've created this cage of like, oh, they're thinking about their money constantly versus
Mhm.
the ones who never think about it. Sometimes they're okay. Other times they're like, oh, is that why my credit cards are a little higher than normal? So like really kind of hitting home like what should happen within a money date? So one, how do we make it so it's not a cage, but also how do we make sure that we do this on a regular basis?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love to have kind of an agenda for a date. And then you can add and subtract things depending on the month. And usually I'll do with myself and my partner, we'll have a money date monthly. So it's looking at your budget. So what's coming in and your expenses and kind of taking a look at how is that going? Do you need to make any adjustments for the next month coming up? Um, how are you doing on your goals? If you've set goals, whether they're like short term or long term, you've probably broken those down into more actionable steps that you're taking weekly or biweekly or monthly or whatever it is. How are you doing on those goals? Do you need to make adjustments there or maybe focus on them more, readjust your priorities? Are there any big expenses you need to start planning for? And then just kind of overall what worked this month and what didn't, and keep it as simple as that.
Beautiful, beautiful. I like have it. I've got it down to such a science now that I know how fast it's going to take and like little things and and I'm a number. I do like numbers, so I will admit that. And sometimes I'll just like do a little projection at the bottom, like if it keeps going the way
Hmm.
it's going, and it gets to start being fun the more you see it. And I think that the clients that I do see that do these money dates that actually do them on a regular basis are the ones that are able to go like, oh, I know where to spend my time. I know where,
Yeah.
if I know where my money is, I'm probably going to stop putting this thing off that I know is important to what that looks like. So when we talk about this relationship, what have you noticed when someone does this, like knows their spending, knows their things? How do you notice like their bottom line? How do you notice like the in general how money comes to them?
I think it starts to become a more expansive relationship because it kind of flips the mindset of like, you're taken care of. So all of the like expenses, goals, you've already like have a plan for those and those are set aside. So when you do have extra or maybe you have a bigger goal, you feel comfortable to spend on that without guilt, to plan for it because you're comfortable with kind of how you're managing your money. So it feels more expansive, like you have more opportunities. You're not avoiding it altogether and then feeling guilty later because you purchased something that maybe wasn't aligned. And you're not afraid to your earlier point, maybe pull some levers so you can increase your income for the next month and you're comfortable with maybe having a little bit more expenses to support that. The other important thing I wanted to mention about a money date is I also love building in like little celebrations or treats. So if you do like meet a goal, to also use your money to say like how am I going to reward myself because I met this goal. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to like go out and buy something. You can if that fits within your budget, but you can also find like non-monetary things that feel really great to you that you can also use to celebrate yourself because I think that also helps it to feel exciting because you know that like oh I'm meeting these goals and like I'm planning these like little me dates for myself or like maybe I'm doing like a spa day at home or whatever it is.
Oh, I love that too. I feel like it's so helpful to have just it's kind of like a delayed gratification type of thing. It's
Mhm.
you're celebrating yourself, but you're also like having this date that you're looking forward to. So it's this daily momentum, and I think that's so helpful. I love that. I've definitely had like a I'm a Marvel nerd a little, and
Me
like
too.
oh my God, okay. I'm gonna try not to get it. We'll come back. We'll come back. We'll come back. Anyway, I've literally like told a friend, I'm like, hey, I'm trying to hit a goal, and I want to have a Marvel marathon night.
Ooh, I love
So
that.
so we can but I want to do it after I hit this goal, and I'll have my friend who is just as involved and going like, I'm ready for this damn marathon night. How close are you? And they're like, and we're trying to like keep each other motivated in that way. So it like there's absolutely like spending, a few dollars here and there that like to celebrate yourself, totally fine. But the idea is like it doesn't have to be this like money reward. So okay, I gotta just ask real quick, who's your favorite Marvel character?
Oh my God. So I grew up with my dad loving the Hulk. So I really liked the Hulk at one point, but I love like Mrs. Marvel and Who else? I loved Wolverine for some reason because I always felt like he was kind of a rebel and moody, but I liked him.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
I'm a Loki girl through and through. Like
Oh yeah, I
I'm
love.
going like I like the anti-hero version of it, but yeah, but I have yeah, in general we'll talk like I get we'll come back. We'll come back.
I'm into this Marvel marathon too because I'm like I want to watch the whole like series with Avengers and like Captain America and like watch everything in order.
I'm the same way. I've done it a few times now. I even put my husband through it, and he's like, I get why you like it. Like I finally got him through it. So
It's so fun.
so fun. It's so fun. So let's actually move on to talking about how, like, we're talking about money dates and like really how important they are. But what I feel, and I'm just being completely frank, is that like I feel like that we're starving for somebody who can give entrepreneur support when it comes to financial advice. So like even
Mhm.
to, like I'm a reader. I've read a number of books like, about finances, and I keep the same rule keeps coming up, the 50/30/20 rule. This idea of so what is it? 50% is supposed to cover your like everyday expenses and your rent.
Expenses.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's like 30% might
Savings
be
is that?
like
And like 20%
retirement or
some.
something, and then the 20% is like spending, maybe. I could be getting that wrong. But yeah, I know what you're talking about. I don't think that necessarily applies even to an individual because I
So
think we
you're
were
saying
talking
like
about
not even
this.
like someone who's got a corporate job where they get the same pay every 2 weeks kind of thing. Is that
Yeah, yeah, I think it can be more nuanced than that. There's so many other factors that go into your own financial situation, whether you're running a business or you're an individual. And even then, like there's places now where a cost of living, it just doesn't lend itself to be realistic for that, depending on what you're making versus what the cost of living in some of these like even major cities are. So I really think you have to take in your individual situation and factors to really figure out what works best for you. And then also incorporate the goals you have. Everybody has different short and long-term goals, and those require different amounts of money and, adjustments and prioritization. So I think providing like a hard and fast percentage rule to everybody. It's just not necessarily a one size fits all. Now, it could be used as like a baseline guideline, and then you can adjust from there. And I think that's really probably the best intent for it is for it to be a guideline and not a hard and fast rule.
yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think sometimes when people see this rule being put across so many places that they go like, "Oh, I don't fit this. That means I'm not good with money." So like there's a sense of like playing to how this can be personalized in a lot of ways, but it's knowing your money. It's knowing, "Hey, no, I'm cared for in this way."
Mhm.
So I'm curious if
Absolutely.
you'd be open to like let's just put out like what somebody who has been able to bring in around 10K in their business a month, like how would you tell them to kind of figure out where to put their savings, different things like that. Like if I'm an entrepreneur, I've been able to bring in this kind of consistency for myself. What might you tell them whenever they're looking at where their money should go?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would start by figuring out what your expenses are. So your regular monthly expenses. And I usually break them down into three buckets. The first would be your necessity expenses. So those are things that you need to live. So like your rent, mortgage, your utilities, like maybe your cell phone and internet, things like that. It's not necessarily like your Hulu subscription, although like, we're talking about Marvel and I think it's like Disney that has it, right?
Yeah.
So yes, I love having that, but usually when you're thinking about this category, you want to ask yourself, is this something I can live without? Like, am I going to be able to survive without this thing? And if the answer is no, then it's a necessity expense. If it's yes, then it's something you can adjust if you need it to at some point. The second category I look at is basically your goals. So these can be your short and long-term goals. So it can be putting money aside for emergency savings, which I like to call an opportunity fund because I feel like it sounds more positive.
Hmm.
Um, like retirement, if you're saving for a big purchase, like a vehicle or a vacation or a home or anything like that, all of those goals go into that second bucket. So in those first two categories, I say you set up and automate as much as possible. So that is your like, I'm paying myself first categories. And then the third one is like, enjoy your life. So anything left over is like that bucket of money that you can put towards whatever you want to spend with no guilt, because you've already taken care of yourself in the first two categories. And I like to give some direction to that last bucket to kind of ask yourself, like, what are the things that you value? What are the things that really make you happy? And maybe focus your spending on there. And the reason why I do that is because then it kind of like if, for example, if I really like to travel and like maybe go get my nails done and go for a coffee, those might be things that like I want to spend in that bucket versus I bought a bag because I was feeling terrible one day, and then like a couple days later, I kind of regretted buying it because I know I'm never going to use it, kind of thing.
Totally, like this idea of like a what's your conscious purchasing? Like the I think I think the way of looking at it is like similar to like emotional eating. Like why did I have that
Hmm.
whole pint of ice cream? Or like why did I just drop $200 on a bag that I'm not sure I needed in the first place? Like this idea of like how can it be like you are grounded in your decision making whenever you are doing that spending? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, the purpose of the last bucket is so you can kind of just spend with whatever limit you set for yourself in that bucket without thinking about it, without feeling guilty. But if you do tend to like, if you're starting out a budget and maybe you have built a habit where you may be overspending, or you have some goals that you really want to make sure you're focused on, I think it's just good to have your kind of value set to make sure that you're not overspending and you can kind of ask yourself that question to take a step back and say, am I going to be really happy that I bought this in a couple months? If it's no, then like maybe you don't want to spend on that. But yeah, exactly. It's just meant as a rule of thumb, but it's still okay to spend within that bucket because I want to take the shame out of it. I think it's if you're doing really well in the first two categories and you've already set that up to pay yourself, you still want to be able to enjoy your life and your hard work.
Of course, of course. I kind of find out so much about how much of life is us just knowing ourselves and like when
Mhm.
someone like talks about being like truly happy, it has a lot to do with like how much are you making decisions for like how you do things. And I think that there's such a talk about how we spend our money. And I brought this up before we pressed record, but like my husband was listening to Dave Ramsey the other day, and we're like I'm talking like he's the latte guy, and like
Oh my
take off
gosh.
anything that's fun on your in your money just so you can like torture yourself until you got a big savings. Like this concept of that where I love my home coffee. Like I make a good cup of coffee at home. So like I don't look forward to like running out and grab coffee unless it's like with friends. But I have a tendency to like love really high quality skincare. I'm not I don't want to skimp on those things. So like I think there's a sense of whenever at least for me, and you tell me if I'm sort of similar for you, is that whenever I'm thinking about like how I want to spend, it kind of comes back to like how do I want to live my life? Like how like yes, right now maybe I can't buy the top end if I'm getting a certain amount of money, but I know that I if I give myself a little bit of like what's the word I'm looking for? Like that I deserve a little better in certain areas because that's my place of joy. Like is that how you would kind of talk about this idea of discretionary spending?
Absolutely. I'm not a fan of Dave Ramsey, I'll be honest. And I really, one of the biggest reasons too that I work with them is I really just want to eliminate any shame and guilt around money and spending. Going out to buy a latte is not going to bankrupt you. So I want to give everybody listening permission to not stress out about that right now. It's really about, like you said, just like thinking about how you want to live your life and how you want to enjoy your life. We all only have today. So like if you, it's not about like extreme deprivation, like a deprivation diet. I kind of compare it to that because it's so much harder to stick to something if you keep telling yourself you can't, you have to deprive yourself of everything joyful. That doesn't sound fun. It doesn't sound expansive. And it sounds like I'm probably not going to want to do it after a week. But if you give yourself permission to both take care of yourself and then like spend on things that you love, who cares if somebody else thinks it's frivolous or whatever? If you love it and you're happy, great. I think that's something that stick to and sounds joyous and like you're working hard, you should be able to enjoy your money now and later on. And one of the things I like to tell my clients too is like you can buy everything you want, maybe just not all at once.
Yeah, I love that. That's a good way of reframing it. Going like, does it have to be all in one month? Can you like put it on your vision board and it's the next thing you grab? I love that.
Yeah.
So a part of all of this is and a large reason why a lot of people will kind of forego the corporate route is that they believe and it's true that like when you take the entrepreneurial path, we can make more money in a month's
Mhm.
time than we might in a few months' time working in a corporate job. So like the ability to generate more wealth when you run your own business. So I my question kind of for you is like for whenever you're working with clients who are generating higher wealth, who are in general like bringing in more income every month because some like we're talking about spending and budgeting, but sometimes just like we gotta fill the top end. We got to let's make a little bit more money to make it easier on ourselves.
Mhm.
What kind of just in general habits would you say that most wealthy individuals have?
I think having a consistent money dates, being clear on their goals and taking action on those goals. So not just saying and being very specific about what those goals are. So what I mean is like instead of like I want to go to Europe, maybe you'll say like I have a goal to go to Spain next year and I know I want to be there for 2 weeks and maybe I want to fly first class and eat out, the whole time at nice restaurants. That gives you something a little bit more measurable. You have a time frame, and so you can start to break it down into like, okay, what does that look like as far as like how much I have to save? So being very, very specific about goals, breaking them down into actions, and really paying yourself first. I think one of the biggest things for an entrepreneur that is a little different is I always tell my clients to prioritize having their opportunity fund or what we hear it more called as the emergency fund. And it's basically setting aside money for to cover your expenses. So if anything does come up, at least your necessity expenses are taken care of. And usually for somebody in a corporate job, the rule of thumb is like 3 to 6 months, and it really depends on like how easy they think they could get another job to supplement their income if something were to happen. If it's pretty easy and they could get a job right away, maybe 3 months is okay. If they're working somewhere that might take a little bit longer, maybe they err on the side of 6 months. I think for an entrepreneur, it's probably more like 6 to 12 months, depending on the industry, depending on how regular your income is coming in. You just want to give yourself a little bit longer headway because we know that the income might not be as steady every month. And some entrepreneurs have months that maybe they're not making anything, or maybe they have high seasons. So that's the number one thing I would say to prioritize as well.
Definitely. Amazing. So I think a side of this might be talking about like we talked about different ways to save, like emergency fund, all of these things. But for somebody who runs their own business, would you kind of talk about like so let's say like one month I have a really large launch month, that would you encourage them to save a large portion of that just in case that they have kind of the up and the dip kind of form of income?
Yeah, once they have like their number that will cover them to 6 to 12 months, then I would help them put a plan in place to put more money away towards that. And yes, if they have a bigger month and so they have theoretically more money to put towards that savings goal, yes, I would say put that money into your emergency savings and make sure it's in a high yield savings account. Because there's a difference.
What's your favorite high yield savings accounts right now? Because I have a Schwab one, but I know that there's new ones too as well.
Yeah, Schwab, I think Vanguard just opened one, Amex has one. There's a really good list that I usually share with clients, and I think it's like Bank Smart or something like that. They basically list out all the different accounts that you can have, what their fees are, what the um, minimum deposit to start the account. So I can share that with you too, so you can share it with your audience. Right now, I have Wealthfront because they do like 5% when you start, but if you refer people, you can get an extra 0.5% bump, and you can keep getting it the more you refer people. So I think that's always a
Oh,
nice deal.
amazing. Yeah. If we can get a hand on that list, we'll put it in the show notes. That would be lovely. That would be lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the biggest thing with a high yield savings account is there's so many options out there that don't require you to have a minimum deposit. They don't have any fees and they're really easy to withdraw and deposit money. I would go after those. Those are my favorites. The ones that typically want you to have like a minimum deposit or a minimum balance or have some kind of fee attached to them, then that kind of starts to eat into your interest rate or the convenience of it.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I feel like you're a wealth of knowledge of like thinking about how all of the things go, but you also told me that you like to help people think about manifesting money. What do you think people get wrong when we bring up this topic? Like what do people get wrong when we talk about manifesting more money in their lives?
The biggest thing I think that we get wrong or just like don't do is take action. I don't think of manifesting as like, okay, like I'm going to say I want $10,000 and then I'm just going to go sit on the couch and it's just going to show up on my doorstep. I think it's about being really clear about what you want, what that looks like, how you're going to feel, how you're going to act, and then taking action on that manifestation. That's the biggest thing that's going to make a difference because I think it's kind of like the universe is saying, like, I will help you, but you also have to help yourself. So, what are you going to do to make this a reality? If I see that you're doing it and you have the capacity to hold whatever you're trying to manifest, then yeah, I'm going to give you these gifts. So, I think it's really the action part.
Oh, I completely agree with this. I mean, I do love a good vision board, but I feel like it's just more of an energy thing. Like sometimes when I would wake up in the morning and I'm just like not feeling it, I can at least engage with like why am I putting myself through this again? Or like what is the motivation to kind of get me out of this funk in some way, shape, or form? So I feel like vision boards, they're not the only thing. They're just helpful to kind of pull up your energy, at least for me. But
Yeah.
the other side of it is like I think when people talk about like be the thing, it's not think the thing. It's not like, envision the thing every day, but it's like what does it mean to like be this person? Because I think a client of mine recently asked me about quantum leaps. And it's like
Hmm.
it's not just to reach the thing you want, but to be able to hold it once you're there. And somebody I feel like who hasn't been taking action, so like they might get that big cash month or they might make the money they're looking for, but holding that and continuing and making that more of a consistent part of their life, if they didn't create that evidence beforehand, it just might be a little bit more difficult. So when you're talking about like people trying to make really big money goals, what kind of actions do you think that they kind of forget to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something like some of the basics that we talked about is having that relationship with your money. Don't avoid it. Um, so the money dates, making yourself you're setting up your like budget and your goals to be automated and paying yourself first, so that's all taken care of. Um, I also think like regularly communicating about money, asking for help when you need it, working on your thoughts and taking action to reframe those. Because I also think thought work is really important, but you also need to have action behind it. So when there are like beliefs that come up or fears that come up, how do you work to solve those and like maybe reframe them and then take action to start kind of teaching yourself that no, this other reality can be true too. And you can hold space for those other things or the expansion that you want. And also just taking action even if you're afraid,
Yeah.
I think is a big thing. Yeah.
What are some common fears that you find people have around money, like in general, that we need to do this thought work on?
Yeah, one of the biggest ones I see a lot is investing because there's this, and I think it's very prevalent in just like the finance industry because it's kind of made to make it seem intimidating because quite frankly, there's a lot of professionals in the industry that make money off of just like investing for people because everybody thinks it's really difficult. But it doesn't have to be. It can be very simple and be something that you set up and look at once a year and you're good. So I think investing is one of the biggest fears because there's a thought that invest my money, I'm going to lose it all.
Mm,
And I always think there's always risk in everything you do in life. It's just you also want to think, well, what is the risk if I don't do it?
I like that.
So for investing as an example, say I like wanted to save $100 in my savings account. Well, if I invested that, I could potentially make a lot more money and just like leave it in the market for 10, 20, 30 years, and it could build to thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, whatever return you're making. If you kept that same amount of money in a savings account, you might get a few dollars, $10 or something like that, depending on how long you keep it in there. So that risk is actually greater if you don't go and invest because you're losing out on all that money that is essentially just working for you without you really doing much, except for like taking that first step.
Yeah, I would definitely say when I've put some money into stocks, one, it's like money. I don't like see it as my money. I see it as like play money until I want it back. So
Mhm.
it's like if I lose it, I lose it. If I like gain it, I gain it. But I think there's a sense of like allowing it to be more of a playful place more than like if you have goals, make sure that's where more of it's going. And then the stocks are like you play with it until you kind of figure it out. I would totally agree with that. So I as you were talking, I was thinking about a client of mine in the past who we were talking about like how she wanted to bring in more cash flow on a regular basis, and she had this deeper like family tie because her in the past her family had like lost their business, went bankrupt. This wasn't even her parents, but like two generations back, but had lost their business, kind of had these things. So she always worried that like everything was going to all the money was going to go. So if you were having somebody going like I'm always worried that my money, I want to lose my money, how might you
Yeah.
help them walk through that thought work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to share that I also have experienced that because I grew up not really having much. I saw my parents really stress out about money. I saw a lot of relationships that broke up around money. Um, like we were on food stamps at one point. I went to school and was working multiple jobs in college, and I went to school with friends that like their parents bought them cars and they could buy whatever they wanted. And I stressed out about like $5. And there were times that I didn't have enough and times that I lost it. So I totally relate to that feeling. Um, I think one of the biggest things I like to look at with those situations is it's okay that that happens. Where are the lessons that we can see in that situation? Where can we look at the opportunities and maybe learn from that so that we can set ourselves up to be better? Because it's okay if we make mistakes. It's okay if we take a risk and maybe it doesn't pan out that the way we want. But it's more about like how do we look at in that situation with their client, like with their parents, is there anything in that situation that we saw that we could learn from and then apply to our own lives to help safeguard us? Or what are some of the things we're doing right now to help give us a more secure foundation? For example, like, are you taking steps to put away for your emergency fund? Have you started automating some of your bill payments so you know at least those things are taken care of? If you're looking into maybe having another stream of income, you're taking action there. You're doing your money dates. So you can also look at all those examples as ways that you're providing yourself some more security to kind of combat that feeling that you're going to lose it all. Well, no, you could maybe like I've gotten laid off before, right? So
Same, same.
it's possible you can lose your job tomorrow, but on the same token, there were things that I did in my own finances that set me up so that I could still cover my expenses. I was still like reviewing my money regularly. I had my emergency fund. So even though those fears do come up, you know that you have some of those foundational things that are set to take care of you. And the other thing I like to say is, you always find a way to make money. You've done it in the past. There's examples in the past that you can bring up for yourself. So that is proof and evidence that you can find ways again.
I love that though. I usually like to kind of talk about it is that you can take adversity in two ways. You can allow it to be your story that you're going to be stuck in, or you can realize that having that adversity has gives you more knowledge than someone who's never experienced it. So the idea
Absolutely.
of like I would rather be someone that like fell and I like to joke about it, but like ate shit, like fell on my face and like not like realize that like oh this is not how to do it versus
Yeah.
like never experiencing that and never being able to relate to people who struggle with that. So like the being able to kind of take this idea of I like I don't want to lose all my money. I think it would just remind me of going like I'm gonna have so much waiting for me. So I'm going to create such a sense of security for me. I'm going to be driven to do that so that like I don't get into this situation again and that type
Yeah.
of feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
Yeah,
think
I think it's all like we all make mistakes and we can choose to learn from it and continue to do better. And there's no shame in making a mistake or that's the life and human experience. So,
yeah, we get to actually live a bigger life when we make some mistakes. Like in
absolutely.
my opinion, for sure. And I think this kind of plays a little bit into debt. So, like, some people who are really wanting to change their lives, they might put money on a credit card, things like that, to try to learn the skills that would generate that in the long term would make them more money. How would you help somebody maybe reposition the way they look at having some debt when they're trying to create something bigger for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, the thing with that is you want to be make sure that you're setting yourself up so it's not something that snowballs later and then it's something that you can't get out of as easily later or it doesn't affect your longer term goals. So like the example of credit cards, usually those comes with a really high interest rate. I love credit cards when used in a certain way in which, and by that I mean paying off the balance every month. So, what I would say to somebody that wants to leverage credit cards is ask yourself if you can pay off the balance every month. And if not, maybe there needs to be more of a reframe of what the expenses are. Because to me, I think because the interest rates are so high, you end up paying so much more over the long term if you keep a balance on a credit card. With other debt, like there's
Is there some
personal
but
loans
there's
and
those
oh,
like
go ahead.
interest-free credit cards like for 18 months, stuff like that. I like that's sometimes what like a client might do, like when they're
Yeah,
like giving themselves 18
some
months,
time.
yeah, that type of thing to do that. Is that would you say that that's still not a good plan, or what would you say?
So you mean like something like you sign up for a credit card or a loan that says you're not paying any interest as long as you pay the balance off within that 18 months?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think something like that is okay as long as you know that you can pay that balance in that time frame. I think the key is like trying to avoid the additional interest as much as possible. I know that's not always easy. Like I've taken student loans or other things because you're making an investment, whether it's in your education or your business. But it's really making sure that you're not taking on more than what you think you can pay off within that time frame.
I feel like it's kind of like hitting on that same idea of like like let's make sure this is a grounded choice. You're not just putting it
Yeah,
you're like that you have a plan to pay it off or you have a focus to make sure that happens, which I think is a great approach for sure.
yeah.
So you have shared so much knowledge, money dates, how to change our thought patterns, all of the things. I usually like to ask one last question before we hop off for the day. This podcast is called Limitless. So what would you say for all these females who are wanting to take, like own their money, all of the things, like what would you tell them that limitless means to you?
Oh my gosh, I love that question. Limitless to me means abundance and being empowered. And I think women are so amazing and badass. I think we can do anything and everything we put our mind to. We're so good at like building community and expanding and taking care of each other. And that's another reason I got into what I'm doing now, because I think more women in the hands of money means we do more amazing things for the people around us. So yeah, it means abundance to me.
Beautiful, beautiful. Elizabeth, thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge. How can we stay connected with you?
Yeah, so the best way to find me is on Instagram. My handle is Elizabeth underscore M Shell. So it's the Michelle without the I. Yeah, and like feel free to DM me, connect with me. I'd love to talk more about money.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you.